I mean, I couldn't wait. It's Romania Black. And yeah, I watched episode 14 a few days ago and was like, oh, we're going to end on that cliffhanger? Oh, no. So we're in episode 15 of Dororo. And I have some really interesting comments from episode 12 to go over, like, from some different perspectives about a specific point of episode 12, but that has just been on Patreon. But I watched episode 14 literally a few days ago, and then this morning I woke up and I was like, I'm going to go ahead and watch episode 15. But the mods keep me up to date each week, so I've been able to look at the episodes on Patreon for episode 12 and then episode 11 on YouTube, so that gives you an idea of where I'm at in recording right now. But what I thought was interesting was episode 12, obviously the worst family reunion ever, and luckily we're taking a break from that nonsense to have them go into some new nonsense, which is this whole thing with Sabame, and I'm just more interested in, I have my theories from last episode about the baby, the ghost that I think is the nun, and Sabame, and then his moth wife and caterpillar children. And I want to have answers, and that's mainly the reason I wanted to watch this episode. I was like, I want answers. So, with that being said, I do have from episode 12 3 different perspectives. It's like the Goldilocks of perspectives about the mother's involvement in all of this, because we've had a lot of discussions about moms. I really like the contrast between Hyakkimaru and his virtually non-existent but has kind of always been there relationship with his mother, and then Dororo, whose relationship with their mom was so close, and then they've lost that relationship. So I thought it was interesting because there are 3 different commenters with 3 different perspectives about the mom's involvement and inaction with all of this that's been going on. So I want to give you the first 2 very different perspectives, and then the kind of Goldilocks perspective, right? So HBanana7 says, there is a saying, it's very hard to get into the pot of riches, but leaving the pot is even harder. And we're going to talk about Tahomaru in this whole mix as well, because we have to. I really like that phrase, and I really am glad that HBanana7 said that, because it's so true. Once you get into the lap of luxury, it's very hard to want to leave, right? Because it's just so good. So I think that helps to add kind of to the drama with Hyakkimaru and everyone wanting him to not succeed, because then it ruins their prospects. But it's kind of like, well, how'd you get here? So, Hyakkimaru is a really interesting thing because he's a literal representation of how they got there. And he's a living being. So it's not just like a population or an issue or a thing. It's like, this person is right in front of you, and it's like, hi, I'm the reason you have nice things. You gonna hurt me? And then it's, yes, they are. And it's so like, what do we do with that? It's very Attack on Titan in its thematic design, and I like that about it. I wonder if Isayama took influence from Dororo. I'm sure that they did in some respect from what we've seen so far. But HBanana7 says, I like the mom, but I do question why she never left Daigo in search of her son. That frustrates me. She prays so hard for years, even kind of putting Tahomaru on the back burner, but doesn't take any initiative. Then she's like, oh, sorry, Hyakkimaru, please forgive us. I do believe her years of prayers have kept Hyakkimaru safe, which, poor Hyakkimaru, I'm being pretty harsh on the mom when it's all Daigo's fault. She feels so bad that she's wanting to kill herself. Thank goodness the goddess of mercy dispersed in the mother's place. The fact that the goddess of mercy has possibly been protecting Hyakkimaru all this time and now it's dispersed is troubling in a way, very troubling. But I did respond to HBanana7 saying, like, I wanted to talk about this in this discussion, but there's a lot of facets to it, and when we get down to the Goldilocks answer, we'll talk about it. But I think that in some ways, again, this is not excusing her actions, but to play devil's advocate, I think that because of her position as the leader of the village's wife, she felt she couldn't leave, or she felt obligated to stay by her husband's side, or maybe she tried to leave and Daigo didn't let her. We don't know the situation. But that is a good point that, she sat there and prayed about it, but what did she do? And again, we're going to go down to the other comments to talk about that. But I'm glad that you bring it up because, yeah, it is. She's just like, oh, forgive us. And Hyakkimaru's like, did you ever come and try to find me if you believed that I was alive? And we'll get down and talk about that. But I think that it is important to bring that up. But yeah, the whole goddess of mercy dispersing, it does make me go, I don't know how we should feel about that. But we'll cross those bridges when we come to it. Moomin Comet says, Tahomaru did not walk away from his people. He was raised to not walk away. It does seem sudden to me. Tahomaru views himself as a servant of his people. In that regard, he's better than his father. Agreed. Yes, he was on the right track, but he swayed off track again. Was he gaslit by his father? I'd say to a degree. Daigo told him everything, and Tahomaru still went along with it. We all have choices, and sometimes the choices we make are selfish. It is far harder to lose stuff than to gain it. And also, Daigo is a piece of crap. Yes, Daigo is the worst. And I do believe that Daigo has manipulated his son because he's let his son believe that he's this great person. And it's hard when you think someone's amazing to suddenly have the realization that they're not. That can be a hard pill to swallow. And I think that Daigo manipulates Tahomaru's love of his people. Like, he wants to serve his people, and Daigo's like, well, if you don't kill your brother, I guess your people are all gonna die. And it's like, but you put them in this position, Daigo. This is your responsibility. And he's just shoving it off on everybody else. So yeah, I feel bad for Tahomaru, but I get why he's making those decisions. But then Moomin says, Hyakkimaru's mother, I feel so bad for her. She's been in pain for 16 years. The discussion of mothers and what they are, what they sacrifice, and how they suffer for their children. I want to go on with this subject, but I'll save it for later. Yeah, with the mom still being alive, I think we're going to go back to this subject in the show itself, which is why I liked this discussion to start us out on episode 15, because we're not getting back to them, I'm sure, for another couple episodes, but I feel like it's coming. But I do think that, yeah, it is to say something that the mom, you know, she was willing to die to pay for her sins of what she did to Hyakkimaru, and her sacrifice and suffering for her kid kind of relates to Dororo and her mom. So it's a whole thing. But Anime Annie kind of is the Goldilocks of all of this by saying, the way Hyakkimaru and Tahomaru's mother's lips tremble when Tahomaru mentions the baby she lost always gets me. She's had to suffer all these years with the loss and the knowledge that their prosperity came from such a sacrifice. Her thinking, I lived upon a falsehood, while panning over some of the luxurious clothing she's had to wear since the land had become more prosperous, to me shows, in a way, she was complicit. Yeah, when she like sheds off all the nice fancy robes to go and basically, you know, commit suicide out on the battlefield, it's like she realizes, she's like, everything that we've been living a lie, and everything that we thought was nice was only because we sacrificed this baby to have it. Not in sacrificing Hyakkimaru to the demons, but rather not speaking out against the propaganda of how great Daigo is and how he fought and locked away the demons. Yeah, her saying we're living in a lie, being like, Daigo's been convincing the entire village how great he is, including their own son. And she's like, no, that's actually not true at all. And so, but Daigo's words to her later, how many times must I tell you, makes me wonder how many times, behind closed doors, she tried her best to fight against the evil choice that Daigo made. And that's kind of I felt like that was a good response to H Banana's comment, being like, we don't know as the audience if and how she's been trying to fight back. We know that Daigo, while he seems to care for his wife, is very aggressive towards her in ways that make me uncomfortable sometimes. And I think that she has tried to fight back, but he's just pushed her back down. Now, can we get onto her for not maybe fighting back more? I guess, but you know, if we're going to go given the time frame in that, you know, what choices did she have? And of course she had the choice to fight back and to run away and go try to find him. She had that choice. That was always there. But, you know, then you have to consider, why did she not make that choice? And so it's interesting. I think it's very fascinating to see the different opinions about the mother's actions or lack thereof. And I think that's really fascinating to kind of analyze as we go through. Like I said, I'm sure that towards my theory is towards the end of this season, we're going to roll back around to have our final arc with, you know, with them. If we look at the rule of 8 for the second core, episode 13 started us in this second core. So 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Episode 20 would be the rule of 8. So I don't know if we'll wait till episode 20 to go back to the family, because that would only leave us like 4 or 5 episodes with them. But I feel like we're going to come back around to the mom. I feel like it's going to happen eventually, but we got to make it past episode 15 first. And I've talked for nearly 10 minutes. So I do have my internet back, which is exciting. So we're going to be watching this on the streaming service. There's only one ad. We'll just deal with it and I'll edit it out. Y'all know when that happens. But I'm super excited to get into this series and see what happens in this second half. I don't think it'll be a three-parter. I think this is going to be a two-part to see how we're going to handle old Mothra and her family. But in any case, I hope you all enjoy. But we're going to start Dororo episode 15, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Well, that episode was all over the place. No, honestly, in terms of the content of the episode, it's one of my favorites so far because it's asking this very human moral dilemma. But I will be honest with y'all, the animation was so distracting throughout this entire episode. And I really, until I took a second to like go back and be like, okay, what are the themes of this episode? What are we talking about? And then it's like, oh, this episode's really good. The animation was so distracting. So I looked it up, and Reddit is good for a few things, but apparently this was, when you question whether this was a result of COVID, you might want to be like, what is going on? But it is not, even though I was thinking, okay, this came out in 2019. Is this like a Haikyuu season 4 episode 13 or 15 situation? It is not. This was not outsourced per se, but the animation and storyboard director for this episode was Osamu Kobayashi, who directed the first ED, which I like the first ED a lot, actually. I like it a lot. Apparently this was the only episode that they animated and storyboard directed, which I'm glad for. I have nothing against someone's artistic vision, but I do find issue when the artistic vision does not match the flow and pacing of the rest of the series. When you just randomly give someone an episode and be like, animate this, and it is tonally and pace-wise so variously different than what we've seen so far, it is distracting. And it takes away from the message of the episode, which is really, really good. So, unfortunately for him, I'm glad that this is the only episode that he does, because it was distracting. And I was like getting taken out of the moment. I kept being like, oh, that's weird, or that's unintentionally funny, or when the moth just collides into the tower and there's no reason for it. I was like, what? Although there were a couple moments that were really well done, but I'd wished it was one of those situations where I was like, oh, damn, if this had been animated a little bit subjectively better, then it could have been such an amazing moment, but it's fine. There were some really interesting moments here. Soundtrack was great. But again, it was distracting because the theme of this episode is so interesting. But that's my qualm with the animation. I'm like, oh, buddy, okay. But anyway, so this episode, all about, speaking of which, of complicitness and our actions, and is there a happy medium? It's so funny we talked about that in the introduction because it's the central point of this episode. So we find out the village is literally very cultish, and they've been very complicit in sacrificing the nun, the children. I don't know why it didn't hit me last episode, because I guess last episode we've been so used to the villain of the week setup that I thought, oh, well, it's Sabame, and Sabame is he's fooled his entire village into thinking that he's their savior when he's been sacrificing people to this moth demon. No, come to find out, the entire village is in on it, and they know what's going on, and they're complicit with it. And it's like, oh, well, And so that opens up the can of worms, which I should have made that connection, because back in episode 2 with the Snake Lord, the Snake Demon, the higher-ups knew about the Snake Lord and were complicit because they knew it was keeping their village safe. Here, everybody knew, and they were all in on it, and they were all okay with sacrificing these innocent kids and the nun if it meant keeping the village safe. And that's a problem. So, but the thing about it is, from the very start of this episode, Dororo, I like Dororo being the audience surrogate, because Dororo is going through the same conflicting ideologies and conflicting messages that we, the audience, are going through. Because from the very start of this episode, I was floored that they were staying there, one, but then they were also eating the food that Sabame was giving them. And And the crazy thing is that none of the food was poisoned. I mean, granted, the food was buttering them up, you could say, for them to be fed to the demons. So it's basically like, here, Hansel and Gretel, have some more cake. We're going to feed you to the demons later. But there is an aspect about it where at the beginning of the episode, I was like, oh, well, look at Dororo and Hyakkimaru just taking advantage of the situation and getting their bellies full before leaving. They were complicit in taking advantage and hospitality from someone that was responsible for murdering the kids. And you could argue they didn't know it at that point, but they did know there was a demon there, and they did know it was causing trouble. But rather than immediately, saying, hey, I don't want your food until you explain what's going on, no, they took the food. They took the food and took advantage of the hospitality. And I was like, ooh. So that adds another layer to it, right? It adds another layer to it. Now, I love that Dororo is our audience surrogate. To be like, to go through the moral dilemma and say, what, and you could argue Sabame, it's so interesting because Sabame is like Daigo in a sense where Sabame was complicit in doing these heinous acts to protect the village and keep it prosperous, much like Daigo is as well. We can argue, though, the difference between Sabame and Daigo is Sabame doesn't seem to care about legacy. Like, Sabame doesn't have any heirs to the throne taking over the cult village. They're just literal caterpillars and demons, right? And so there's that whole situation. But then you have Daigo, who is concerned with legacy. And for Daigo, it's not so much, I'm doing these actions to save my village and keep the people safe. I'm doing it to make myself look good and to feed my ego and to make me this pillar of greatness that'll have a legacy and lineage and all of this. So there are levels of difference there. Also, the confirmation that Sabame was just helping out the demon and that them killing the people, killing the nun. The reason why he had the red demon energy coming off of him is because he's been killing the nun and killing the children. And that's why my mind went totally down the gutter last week and thought he had the red energy because the demon had been having sex with him. I really thought that. I thought the demon was having sex with him and that's how that happened. I thought it was very like Heaven Official's blessing. Got that residual demon energy in him. I guess I'm glad that bestiality or demonology wasn't a thing. But my mind totally went there. And so then I was like, oh, yes, no, of course. It's from killing people. Yes, of course. Why would you think anything else? I mean, he took her as his wife. What else were we supposed to think? I thought these were like little demon caterpillar babies. Never mind. But yeah. So they try to basically pull the rug over Sabame. I did not like the bags under Hyakkimaru's eyes this entire time. I have watched Ace of the Diamond. I am triggered by bags under eyes. I am like, nope, that's a sign that you're tired and exhausted and at your worst point. I'm like, I hate all of this. Please stop. I need Hyakkimaru to get... I feel like Dororo is going to be taken by Itachi, which, what the fudge? Itachi coming in at the last second and it just happening like, what? Speaking of Attack on Titan, what is this? Where something just happens and you're like, set up? So, yeah. I have a feeling Itachi's going to take Dororo because they want the damn map. Of course they do. You may be asking how Itachi could have gotten the other side of the map and knows that Dororo has the other side. Well, he was Dororo's dad's right-hand man. So I'm sure that he kind of probably knew about it because the dad trusted him. And I'm sure he either got the first half of the map from the dad himself at some point, or this is morbid, but Dororo didn't bury the mom. If the mom was just left there in the spider lily field, there's a very good chance Itachi came across her and took the map. I'm just saying, it's morbid, but this show has gone there. So the one thing was some of the pacing of this episode was frenetic. It just felt like there were moments where I wish they'd lingered a little bit more. And then there were moments that were just happening out of nowhere. And I was like, how did we get to this point? And so like the final battle between, we'll talk about that when we get to it, but the final battle between the Moth and Hyakkimaru was so rushed. And then Itachi just showing out of nowhere to be like, hey, Dororo, long time no see, yoink, and then going off. And it's like, no, but the only thing about this is I hope that Dororo getting taken by Itachi, which I think is going to happen, obviously, in the next episode, it will make Hyakkimaru kind of stop what he's doing and realize that, oh yeah, I do, because Dororo is the glue holding all of this together. Like, Hyakkimaru needs Dororo around, or Hyakkimaru is going to become a demon. And I'm glad that we, at least in this episode, get confirmation that Hyakkimaru is killing the demons, because one, that's the only thing he knows how to do, and two, he just wants his body back. And you can't blame him for wanting his body back. It is human that if something is taken from you, you want it back. And that is very human. And that's such a raw, organic response. And I appreciate Hyakkimaru for being open. And that's just, he's simple. That's why he wants that. But as we've seen in this episode, the world is not that simple. And it is not that black and white. And even though Hyakkimaru can sit there all day and say, I'm just doing this for this reason, I don't care about anyone else, I don't care about anything else, you can't do that, because your actions have consequences. They affect people, and those effects will linger and ripple onto other things, and then you are implicated in them, right? So I think Hyakkimaru is going to have to come to the conclusion, and we only have so many episodes left, to realize that, yeah, your actions do have consequences, and you may want to kill the demons, but what else are you going to do after that? And there's more to it than just killing the demons. So I don't like Dororo being potentially taken by Itachi, but I felt like it needed to happen after this episode, because Hyakkimaru is going down a path that Dororo is trying to stop him, but it's not, working thus so far. Now, Sabame says that we've all got these blessings from above, and that's why we've been able to be prosperous and everything. And Dororo's like, I didn't imagine that we'd be, allowed to stay here, but here we are. This is working to our advantage. And then Hyakkimaru's like, I'm not going to let the demons go free. And Dororo's like, okay, well, we know what? You fight them demons. I'm going to go investigate in the town and see what's up about the nun and the burnt temple, see what we can find out, and just go from there. And then we have the OP. So yeah, the thing about it is, and this is just me speaking from morality, is that it is not cool to get your salvation by murdering others and to be complicit in that, because that, and it's definitely an analogy for so many instances that has happened in our own time. And you can tie it back to, I'm sure, any number of moments in history, no matter what culture you are from, where people have built their peace off of the death and destruction of others. And that's, tale as old as time, as long as humanity's been around. But I think the thing about it is, what makes, and we'll talk about it when Dororo burns down the village and then it's like, did we do the right thing? I think the important thing is that you question it, that you think about it, that you have those discussions, and that you recognize and are self-aware of, oh, did I do something that's wrong, and what do I need to do about it? I think the problem is that the village here are totally okay with it and are saying like, oh, but we're fine. We're sorry about you all, but we've got to take care of ourselves, without that humanity or morality of saying like, is this a bad thing that we're doing? The village doesn't even question that. They just go along with it and are saying like, oh, everything's fine. We don't have to, what morality? When you look at it from an outside perspective, you're like, that's horrifying and cruel. And what are you doing? And for Dororo, the biggest difference is that Dororo, at the end, when the village burns down, Dororo is like, should we have done this? What is the effect of what we've done? Is this good or bad? Now that I've seen the destruction that it's caused, I don't want to do it again. And that's the main thing, is that Dororo sees the village burning down and sees the people and how horrified and sad they are at the end and how much destruction it's actually caused. And Dororo's like, what I did was a bad thing, and maybe we shouldn't have gone this far. And the thing is, I don't think Dororo will do it again, right? Whereas the village saw the destruction they did and said, we're fine with this, and keep doing it again over and over again. And that's what's wrong, right? And it's sort of the situation that Daigo is in right now, that Tahomaru and them are in, is that we've seen what we're destroying and we're okay with it. And that's the problem, right? So, I mean, this is a classic example, but it's, I think of World War II and I think of Germany in the concentration camps. It's people being like, but we're at peace at the cost of these people dying, and we're fine with that. And it's like, that's horrifying and wrong, but they were fine with it, at the time. So it was reminding me of that. And, there's modern examples too, but we're not here for a political discussion today. But it's still the fact that Dororo, I think, retains the moral high ground by the end of the episode, because they've questioned and realized what they did was wrong. And they're like, what should we do? And how should we? It's going back to what Biwamaru told Dororo, saying like, that power that you have is going to possibly come at a cost. And are you willing to pay that cost? And what are you going to do? But Biwamaru also says, like, you can kill demons all day, every day. But what difference is it making? And it's good to know that for Hyakkimaru isn't killing all the demons to save people. He's killing the demons to save himself. And at least he's honest about it, But then it's like, what are the repercussions of what you're doing? And Dororo's trying to tell him that, being like, yeah, I want you to get your body back, but we also have to think, what are we leaving in the wake of when you get your body back? Because they left that one demon in the pond and the people had to fish it out so they weren't poisoned. We've burnt down a whole village now and destroyed their entire way of life, even if they were terrible people. So, like, what are the consequences of what we're doing? And are we thinking about that? And Hyakkimaru just doesn't seem to care. The one animation where the kid was eating the rice cake with Dororo, it was unintentionally really simple and kind of bad quality, but I really liked it. It was really cute. It was adorable. But yeah, everybody, it's the idea that people turn a blind eye to their cruelty. And they're just like, oh, well, that's just the way it has to be for peace. And nope, that's when you go down a no-no hole. That's a wrong time. Nope. And I kept wondering, like, what the rice building was. I've watched Walking Dead, and that building, I kept thinking of a season of The Walking Dead, and I was like, oh, there's going to be them caterpillar babies in that building. And they were just in the basement. And then the basement led back to around where the temple was buried, and they were eating off the bones of the kids. We'll get to that point in a minute. I do like the comparison of when they get to the top of the hill. Hyakkimaru, you are not stealthy, sir. I feel like Hyakkimaru could have been stealthy, but Sabame could smell them coming, which I'm sure, Hyakkimaru probably, well, they bathed the other night, so he probably doesn't smell terrible, but still. I liked the comparisons to Sabame watching over the village, very similar to Daigo and Tahomaru watching over the village. And I like stories where the villains and the people of it are complex. They're not just like, we're good people and they're bad people. Like, everybody is a moral shade of gray. Everybody has morality issues in this series, which they do. Dororo's like literally the only patron saint, but even they have a moment where they burnt down the village. I can't believe they burnt down the village. But I like the fact that Sabame, like, the care they have for the village is genuine. And they've seen the effects of war and the samurai coming in and the dogs. The dog with the human head in its mouth was such a grisly image. I was like, ooh, that's ooh. But so they've seen the carnage that has happened and they wanted to try to prevent it. The problem is they became the very monsters themselves that they wanted to protect their village from in that process. And that's what Dororo kind of realizes at the end. They're like, we don't need to become the people that we're trying to not become. We don't need to do that. So Dororo's kind of at this crossroads of like, well, what do we do? And how do we... I feel like in this episode, that's given Dororo the idea that they wouldn't use the wealth from their father if they're able to keep it. If Itachi doesn't steal it, they wouldn't be able to keep the wealth and form like a domain. Because Biwamaru's like, well, you could form a domain in your own clan. I think after this episode, that option is going to be like, nope. Because Dororo has seen what that mentality can do. And they're like, actually, I'm not here for that power. I don't think that power is easily corruptible. And they're like, I don't want to do that. But it's nice to see that Sabame, was coming from a place of wanting to do good. It just quickly went south, right? And then all these villagers being in on it. I wondered for a hot second if the rice in the warehouse was like tainted or something, or had something to do with the babies. I was expecting a much grosser outcome in this episode, and things were a lot more relatively simple in the narrative than I was expecting, which isn't a bad thing. But yeah, Hyakkimaru's like, I'm just here to kill the demons. That's what I'm mainly here for. And there is something to Hyakkimaru that I appreciate, that he does not get, caught up in politics and doesn't get caught up in squabbles and all of that. He's just like, I want my body back. Y'all took it. I'm taking back what's mine. There you go. And the problem is, for Hyakkimaru, his battle is relatively simple. The demons took his body. There was no two sides of the story, right? Because you have the nuns having their side of the story and the village having their side of the story. You have the Asaka clan having one side of the story, the Daigo clan having the other side of the story. In most conflicts, you have two parties that believe they are in the right. And in some respects, you could look at both sides and say, yeah, I understand why you think this. And I understand why you think that. And it makes it much more complicated. And so that's why it's so difficult with stories like these to be like, well, what's the solution? Well, it's complicated. But in Hyakkimaru's case, what's so interesting is his is not complicated. He was a baby. And the demons went, I'm going to take your spine, and you're a baby and you can't fight back and you have no side. Bloink. And so there is no side to the demons. They took something that wasn't theirs, that they had no right to. So Hyakkimaru is in the right in wanting to take that body part back, because there's nothing that can make the demons go, well, the demons were in the right on this. No, there's not. But the problem is that because of the demons' involvement in every other aspect of the story, now it becomes more complicated, because taking down that demon in this village has affected the entire village. And now that will affect places around that village. And the same thing with Daigo's clan, and the same thing with the Foxfire and all of this. So it's like, it's so interesting to see Hyakkimaru's very simple battle has effects in all the other aspects in a very complex way. And Hyakkimaru just doesn't care about all of the rest of this. But I feel like Dororo, if Itachi gets involved and takes Dororo away, then it will make Hyakkimaru become invested and involved. So, oh my gosh, what a crazy episode. I kept wondering how in the world Dororo was not going to get eaten by the caterpillar children. And then, honestly though, the lunar moth parts where he stumbles across the bones of the children, which grim as F. I loved the baby taking part in saving Dororo. I love the baby and the blue glow, which is kind of like the glow of the lunar moth. So that's a cool comparison. But I honestly think one of my favorite parts about this is when the top of the baby explodes and all of the ghosts of the children come out of the baby. That was the craziest part of the whole episode. The baby being the baby ghost being an amalgamation of all the children that died, and then it popping like a balloon, and all of the kids. That was the one time where I simultaneously thought, this works really well, but also I wish the regular animation could have been for this moment, because that would have been, I feel like it could have been elevated even a little more. But also, the little ghosts do kind of look cute. The ghost children, I'm like, what a crazy moment. That moment made the episode for me, though. I was like, because I wasn't expecting it at all. I wasn't expecting the children to be all so. And then when Dororo has to explain it to Hyakkimaru, they're like, yeah, so. Wild. Absolutely wild. And then we see that Sabame killed the nun. They used the oil, and they burnt everything down, and they threw the children in the fire to feed the moth. And of course, Dororo's like, that's so awful. Like, no matter how much you wanted to keep your village safe, it was not worth the price of killing all of these children who did nothing. Like, these innocent children did not have to die for you, like, for your selfishness. Like, there is an understanding of wanting to protect yourself and have security, but it should never come at harming an innocent life that didn't ask or do anything to you. And Dororo being like, this is awful. How could this happen? And it basically is like, you've become the monsters that you wanted to protect yourself from, you know? So yeah. So then my thing was, Hyakkimaru got stabbed when they climbed atop the moth. They got stabbed. So where did they get stabbed at? Of course. Where did they get stabbed at? Because they went and stabbed the moth. And then the moth, where did it get him stabbed at? Because it flew off with him. And then it's got his claws, I guess, in his shoulder blade. Yeah. So it's not a vital part, but still. And then his leg broke apart, which we just barely saw. I wish we'd gotten a little more emphasis on that, maybe. The moth just flying into the tower, though, and it lighting on fire. I guess because it hit the torch. That's still really funny to me. And then, yeah, I love the ghost children leading Dororo back to Hyakkimaru. And he's like, I pushed down the oil in the storehouse to burn down the rice to make sure they couldn't do it again. And here's the thing. Dororo's a kid and thought, well, I'm going to keep them from, hiding. I burnt down the storage house so that they couldn't, throw people down in there to be eaten by the caterpillar children again. But doesn't realize that was all of their rice that was going to get them through winter. So now, like Dororo in their mind, Dororo cannot process because they're a kid that, all the rice in here, there's so much of it because it was going to comfortably get them through the winter. Dororo's always struggled with having food security. So for them, they don't understand what the concept is of, we have all this rice in this building to let us live comfortably throughout an entire winter for an entire village, because they've never seen that much rice in their life. So Dororo's like, wow, this is a lot of food. Why do you need that much? Well, because that's what they need for a village to keep them safe. And now that all the village rice is gone, the people in the village start fighting again. And they even kill Sabame by the end of the episode. We see Sabame submerged in the rice paddy. And they killed Sabame in all of the stuff going down. And the village is just completely decimated. Right? And then after the fact, Dororo's like, this, was this it felt like Urkel from Family Matters. Did I do that? It felt like, oh shit, I made a horrible mistake. But at least in Dororo's case, a couple things. One, at least in Dororo's case, they recognize and are aware at the end that they did something bad, which will probably translate to them not making that same mistake in the future, which is ideally what you should want to do in that scenario. But two, the villagers pushed Dororo down into the cellar. If they had just let Dororo walk out of the building without pushing them down to the cellar with the caterpillar children, none of this would have happened. So again, the villagers kind of shot themselves in the foot because they kind of caused this entire thing to happen. So actions have consequences, right? But it's often more complicated and complex than we think, right? And then things just get out of control again. So I wish that there had been more, because Dororo looks really sad. And I do like that shot of Dororo waiting for Hyakkimaru to go fight the moth. I wish we'd had more time I almost wish this had been a 3-parter episode, if I'm being honest, so we could have had more time of Hyakkimaru fighting the moth. I don't understand why the moth was in the lake. That part is weird to me because it's a moth. Why was it in the lake like a fish? I guess because it's a demon, but it felt kind of convenient because Hyakkimaru had a bum leg, but whatever. And then Hyakkimaru manages to, I like Hyakkimaru using the leg as like a torch. Like they bring their leg up and the leg has it has on it a bag with oil in it and a torch. It's literally using it as a flamethrower. That part's really cool. Would have loved to seen that get made and a little more of it. That would have been great, but I mean, it makes sense, I suppose. I will say, I thought the Hyakkimaru was getting their leg back in that moment. I thought they were getting their leg back when they crawled out of the water because that would have been convenient. But they don't have their leg, so that's going to make them going after Itachi even harder because they don't have their leg. And I'm like, ugh. I thought they were going to get their leg back. That would have been really helpful. But nope, that's not what we get. The spine popping out, though, was a really effective moment of, it was just the fake spine popping out and then their skin, reconstructing. Also, damn, Jukai, you made a spine out of string in these pieces? DIY master, y'all. But also the fact that his skin I guess it's no surprise his skin healed, allowing him to have that, but... So Hyakkimaru grew a spine. Seems fitting. Seems like something that should have happened. And then we see the village and the results of it. I'm amazed they could walk through that village and those people did not, like, get pissed at them. And they're like, why did this happen? Did we do the wrong thing? And yeah, we see Sabame and he did. This happened because we came here, right? And Hyakkimaru says, not my concern. I don't like Hyakkimaru not caring, because even though he technically shouldn't have to care because it's not his fault that this is all happening to him, at the same time, his actions have consequences and he needs to recognize those. And I agree with Dororo. I wish he'd listen to Dororo a little bit more. And maybe next episode that will force him to do that. We can only hope. But I think that it's important that Hyakkimaru realize that regardless, his actions are going to have consequences, even though he's been trying to avoid that his whole life, literally. And Dororo's kind of realizing that as well, that their presence is having a ripple effect. It's having the butterfly effect. The village would have kept going about its business had they not shown up and broken the status quo. But now it's happened and you can't go back, right? And saying even if you defeat a few demons here and there, it won't change the world at all. Yeah, it's still like so then what do you do? If defeating the demons isn't going to necessarily change the world, then what is your impact? What can you do? And the answer to the question from watching other shows that have similar themes is to do kindness and to spread kindness and good acts to people, because those have ramifications of people's actions and thought processes for generations to come. But explaining that to Hyakkimaru is no simple feat. So, you know, and Dororo's like, well, all you think about is killing the demons and you're just going to end up becoming one. And that's not right. It'll just make you one of them if that's all you care about. And again, we cut to Tahomaru training in that moment, and he's doing the exact same thing. Tahomaru, all he cares about is fighting and killing Hyakkimaru. And it's like, you're just, all of you, Dororo's like, all of you are just becoming the demons that you claim to denounce. And what is the point of that? And it seems right at the very end of the episode that Hyakkimaru kind of realizes, oh, wait, maybe Dororo is a literal representation of the goddess of mercy that was dispersed in front of me. And maybe I should care more about Dororo. And it's like, yes, you absolutely should. And what ends up happening right as he's saying that? Well, Dororo meets up with Itachi. And Itachi looks a bit worse for wear. He looks terrible. He's with this group of bandits. And he's like, I've been looking everywhere for you. And I'm looking for this map. Show me the other half that you have. I'm not surprised that Itachi found out that Dororo has the other half and that the map is there. I'm not surprised because the dad seemed very trusting of Itachi up until his death. So I'm not surprised that he told him, but I also don't like Itachi at all. I'm not surprised we're seeing them again, but I was not expecting to see them this soon or in this context. And I'm like, mother trucker. I also hope that Itachi leaves Dororo alone. I don't want Dororo to get hurt, so... Damn it! Damn it! They included this last minute rushed to get us to want to go ahead and watch episode 16. That's why they did it. I know that's why they did it. How dare you? Show. But whatever. Anyway, so yeah. So I guess we're just going to find out what happens with episode 16. So I'm going to wait and see the comments for episodes 13 and 12 on Patreon and YouTube and go from there. But I'm very curious. There's a lot of philosophical discussion in this episode. So I'm very curious to know your thoughts down below on that. But meanwhile, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Dororo. Bye!